Obviously, the caucus.
Second row.
Sorry, if I could just ask about impeachment and when you guys plan to transmit the articles. Do you have any updates on what that timeline looks like? It sounds like that Pelosi said that she wants to see the resolution in the Senate before transmitting those articles. How soon afterward might you guys do that? What can you tell us?
There was no discussion about that in the caucus meeting. Today, the meeting lasted about an hour and 15 minutes. I support the decision of the Speaker to hold the articles until we get some clarity as to whether there will be a fair, impartial, and comprehensive trial in the Senate.
Good morning. And this is a question for you, but also Ms. Clark, since you referenced this here about this war powers resolution. I guess this is a kind of two-part question. It sounds like this resolution might be a little muddled right now because of the action. And regardless, is it prudent at this stage, if you are going to go ahead and move forward with that, when there's hostilities in the region?
It is an ongoing discussion as to the appropriate timing. We hope to move forward with something sooner rather than later, but there is no time frame, as I understand it, in terms of it absolutely taking place over the next day or two.
And because you had indicated you thought it was going to move this week. Did you know something different?
We certainly had hoped coming into this week to move it this week. We are looking at it. We are in the process of drafting what is a technical document, and we will do it as soon as possible. There is no set timeline, but if I can go back for a minute to the impeachment question, I do want to say that we are concerned with the comments of Senate Majority Leader McConnell, and consider that his comparison to the Clinton impeachment when it comes to calling witnesses is really an apples and oranges comparison. In the Clinton impeachment trial, those witnesses had already been deposed, they had testified, and were part of Starr's report. Here we have John Bolton coming forward saying he would respond to a subpoena, that he would come forward with the information that we need to know. Continuing to block, to coordinate this trial with the White House makes the Senate leader complicit in this obstruction of the facts that we need to put forth in the impeachment trial and put forward in front of the American people.
You know, I have often heard folks say, now is not the time to discuss the use of force and the commitment of U.S. soldiers around the region. I heard that in 2003 as I was carrying a rifle on the streets of Baghdad. I heard it in 2004 and 2005 as I was carrying a rifle in the mountains of Afghanistan. Here we are 19 years later. Thousands of American men and women have died. Tens of thousands have been wounded. We have spent over $4 trillion on our various conflicts, committed in over 30 countries around the world. The time is always right for the United States Congress to have a serious discussion with the American people about when and how we commit men and women into conflict around the world. And it's well past time that we have that serious discussion.
Are you concerned if the House were to pass this, and this was the concern by some Democrats who have military backgrounds like yours, that moving this resolution now would basically leave troops in the theater high and dry because you're essentially cutting off the 01 and the 02 April?
We will never leave troops in a difficult position. We are committed to making sure that our men and women are supported and protected. That is a unanimous belief across partisan lines. But we have to have a serious discussion, and we have to reassert Congress's constitutional role. It is our duty to make sure that we are conducting oversight, and we're having that discussion.
I'm going to go to the third row, but the Congress is provided with the constitutional authority alone to declare war.
On the War Powers, the Progressive Caucus has advocated that two other measures come up with that, the Ro Khanna bill on the funding restriction or prohibition if there's no authorization from Congress, and the Barbara Lee bill to repeal the 2002 AMF. Do you see these coming out together as a package? Is that something the broader caucus could support?
Yeah, there are ongoing discussions as it relates to the specifics as to what the resolution could look like. We won't move forward until we have the robust support of every corner of the caucus. We want to act in a responsible fashion on behalf of the safety and security of the American people. That is what this is all about. First row.
As the substantive debate, you said you're tweaking it. Well, can you just give us some sense of the time frame? I mean, what could change in this War Powers resolution?
Well, again, I don't want to get out ahead of the discussions that are taking place. This is perhaps our most serious and solemn responsibility as it relates to issues of life and death, issues of war and peace. And the caucus, with great leadership from Speaker Pelosi, is committed to getting it right. Andy, you want to? Okay.
Assuming that the Senate passes,
Go ahead.
Assuming the Senate passes the War Powers resolution, President Trump is almost certain to veto it. Did lawmakers miss an opportunity in the NDAA by not getting some measures that would have constrained the president's powers, specifically on Iran, into that must-pass piece of legislation? Was that a missed opportunity? Wasn't that the time to take up some of these issues?
It was not a missed opportunity, but the facts that are before us at the moment are facts that we'll need to respond to, triggered by the president's actions that many view as irresponsible. You know, Donald Trump may have been an arsonist that lit a fuse that could plunge the Middle East into a catastrophic war, though he's trying to pretend as if he's the firefighter. That's a problem. And we need the administration, hopefully later on today, to begin to present to us a forward-looking vision, first and foremost, to keep Americans safe and out of harm's way, but to do so, as both Andy and Jason have talked about, in a responsible fashion moving forward. Third row.
Just going back to impeachment, McConnell's already said he has the votes, you know what the resolution's going to look like. What do you gain by waiting to send the articles over?
As the Speaker has consistently indicated, it's very difficult for her to determine who would be appropriate impeachment managers to present the House's case in the absence of understanding the rules of engagement and what the contours of a trial would look like. Beyond, of course, Chairman Schiff and Chairman Nadler, who one would think are going to be logical choices and participants to lead the effort. But what we have seen over the last several weeks are the additional disclosure of documents that continue to highlight that the president did abuse his power by targeting an American citizen for political gain while withholding intentionally $391 million in military aid from a vulnerable Ukraine. Additional documents subsequent to the Speaker's decision to hold the articles have come out. That's a gain in terms of information to the American people. And we've also seen during this period of time that a critically important potential witness, John Bolton, has said he will testify if subpoenaed. John Bolton had direct communication with the president about this sordid matter and abuse of power. And we know from testimony from Dr. Fiona Hill, characterized this whole scheme as a drug deal, and the president's main operative, Rudolph Giuliani, as a hand grenade.
without getting out in front of yourself or resolving issues, can you talk a little bit about what the discussion is in the caucus around war powers, and as part of that, making sure whatever you guys pass aligns with Senator Kane's?
Yeah, let me yield to Representative Kim and Representative Crow to talk about what some of the considerations should be for us to proceed.
Well, look, what we need to be thinking through is what's going to yield actual results here. What can try to move this forward in a way that shows that that there's going to be a bipartisan approach as well, to the best of our ability. But look, I said this earlier today. This is certainly a big part of it. The war powers is important in terms of understanding the contours of what the president is able to do. But what we also know is that there are lots of different avenues in which the president can proceed with different types of kinetic action. That there are no firm limits that are going to be able to completely restrain what he is willing to do. So that is why it's so important that we have this process to bring out and understand from the president what the actual strategy that he is guided by is. And that's something that I want all of us to be mindful about. The reason why we're having this debate about the war powers and what this president is authorized to do is to bring out into the open and make him and his administration explain to us what exactly their goals are, what they are trying to achieve, and what the off-ramps are to ensure that we don't have major escalation here going forward that could lead to war. That is something that I have yet to hear from the administration. That is something that I'm very concerned about, and I need to hear from him, not just about the military efforts that they're engaged in, but what are their diplomatic outreach, what are the intelligence operations that are trying to help us understand where attacks, future attacks might occur. We are not out of the clear. We cannot let our guard down. We know that Iranian proxies and some of their more traditional outlets for violence are still very much operational and could very well strike. So I just want to kind of put this into that broader context of why it is that we're moving forward with this, and why we need to have that transparency for the American people to understand what exactly this president is willing to do and how far he's willing to go.
You mentioned the practical side of things. How much is the discussion about meshing up with Tim Kaine's resolution so that it can pass the Senate?
Well, look, the idea is that we have something that can be able to pass through both chambers, and we want to have something that can then move forward. So I want to sort of see what it is that we can accomplish on that front, if possible. But like said, there are lots of different considerations happening right now, a lot of robust discussion about that, and we'll see in the coming hours and days where that lands.
As Andy just indicated, the starting point here is we need clarity on what authorizations the administration is currently relying on. And there is disagreement within the administration itself, right? On one hand, you have members of the administration saying that they're relying on the imminent threat lawful authority for the strike. Then you have Mr. O'Brien just last week saying he's relying on the 2002 AUMF, one of the so-called zombie AUMFs. Yet just a couple of months ago during Armed Services Committee hearings, you have Secretary Esper and General Milley telling us that currently they are not relying on the 2002 AUMF for any military operations. So there's inconsistency, there's disagreement within the administration. We need answers and clarity from them now as to what ongoing operations are being based on. And then we can start having a discussion about what authorities they need to make sure that our troops are protected, that our number one priority of securing our installations and our men and women on the ground is taken care of, and what the path forward is.
How important do you view John Bolton's testimony? You talked about it a little bit. Do you feel like it's so vital and his firsthand knowledge is so important that should the Senate fail to call him and subpoena him, he should be called back to the House to share what he knows?
Well, that'll be a decision that ultimately will be made by some combination of Chairman Schiff, of course, the Speaker, and Chairman Nadler. His information does appear to be critical, but it appears critical in the context of enhancing what we already know based on 17 witnesses who did come forward and testify, including individuals like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, Ambassador Taylor, Ambassador Sondland, Ambassador Volker, Dr. Fiona Hill, Jennifer Williams. These are all individuals who were part of the Trump administration and confirmed factually that there was a stunning abuse of power that the president engaged in as it relates to the Ukraine scandal.
You're leaving the door open, he could come back to the House.
Well, that's a question that I think is better directed at Chairman Schiff and, of course, Speaker Pelosi.
You guys have questioned whether there was an imminent threat presented by Soleimani, but you've also called him a terrorist and characterized all of the casualties that he's inflicted on U.S. troops. I'm just wondering what's wrong with taking a terrorist out of the equation like this happened? Where's the dispute there?
Yeah, I'm going to yield to my colleagues, but that is an ongoing discussion, and we need clarity from the administration as to whether this particular provocative action made America safer or not. President George W. Bush and his administration made the decision affirmatively not to take out General Soleimani. President Barack Obama and his administration, which of course struck the leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, also made the decision affirmatively not to take out General Soleimani. Israel, that has the capacity to strike someone like Soleimani, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, consistently made the decision not to take out General Soleimani. Presumably, all of these disparate individuals made this decision because they concluded it would not make the region, America, Israel, or the world safer. So we need answers from the administration. What has changed? Because what appears right now to have changed is that we have more troops in harm's way in the Middle East, 15,000 more troops than 6 months ago. What appears to have changed is that Iran's nuclear ambitions have been reignited. They have indicated they will now not be constrained by the nuclear agreement. What appears to have changed is that the effort to crush ISIS is in shambles, and the presence of American troops in Iraq is in doubt. What also has changed is that Israel is not safer as a result of these actions. They're potentially being threatened by Hezbollah and Iran's proxies in Lebanon. And so we need answers from this administration.
Just to add on this, come from the work that I did before, when I hear that there's an imminent threat, that is a very particular and precise term. And when I worked in Afghanistan and there were imminent threats of attacks against Americans, the type of work that we would try to do would be to go after the operators, to go after the weapons depot or the truck that was going to deliver the attack. What I'm left confused by is if there was an imminent threat, certainly taking out Qasem Soleimani is one part of that. But where's the rest of the equation here? Well, where was the attack against the warehouse depot, the housing the weapons, or the operators or the targeted cell of Kata'ib Hezbollah or whatever group was going to carry it out? So I don't actually understand if that threat has been neutralized or not, if that in fact was the case at all. So I'm left with a lot of just very concerned feelings right now about that. And the fact that I haven't, almost a week after this has started, still left with this kind of question is on top of it. The second thing I just want to say is that the decision of whether or not to strike a high-value target or a terrorist or some other actor is not necessarily one solely based off of are they a dangerous and bad person who has done terrible things. It is the fundamental question that we would encounter in the Situation Room is, are Americans going to be safer or not based on this decision and this action? That includes both the near term in terms of disrupting immediate threats, but it has to deal with sort of the broader implications. Are we safer if our counter-ISIS war comes to an end? Are we safer if Iran will now press on the gas to be able to achieve nuclear weapons? Are we safer if this gives Shia militia groups greater a reason to be able to target our forces and our diplomats in Iraq and the region? So it is not simply a question about how bad Qasem Soleimani was. He was obviously a terrible and dangerous person. I often called him the most dangerous person in the Middle East. But it has to be a broader question about, are Americans safer now?
Yeah, just to reiterate my colleague's comments, we have threats coming from many people in many places all throughout the world. I mean, you look at our sanctions list and our specially designated nationals list, it has thousands of names on it. And there's a reason why we don't send missiles to try to kill all of those people. It's because we are strong, not just because we have a strong and big military, it's because we're smart in how we use it. And we leverage all of our tools, including economic sanctions, diplomacy, and the strength of our allies and our partners throughout the world to contain those threats. So that is the question, is not whether or not there are lots of bad people out there who want to do us harm. That is well established. The question is whether or not in this particular instance, killing General Soleimani was in our national interests and it made us safer and it fed into a larger national strategy, a strategy that has not been described or articulated to this Congress or the American people yet.
Last question.
Quickly, given the urgency of the situation in the Middle East, do you need to do war powers before you send impeachment articles?
One issue doesn't have to do with the other, and they haven't been joined in terms of any of the discussions that we've had. Thank you.